What's going on, Sports Wars? We're here. We're live for another Monday evening quarterback. And this time, Jeremy is back. You saw him on the Sunday Sports Wars stream, and he's finally back from whatever the hell he was doing, not making videos for Sports Wars. So whatever that entails. But we're glad that Jeremy's back. What's up, man?
I'm back, and clearly I'm very popular because there are no dislikes on the stream. So I mean, people are just really happy that I'm back. No dislikes at all. So thank you guys for, nobody hates me. Nobody hates Geeks and Gamers, Sports Wars, Ryan. We're just very positive, popular individuals now, and it's good to be back after a pretty interesting weekend of football.
Yeah, it was. And, we're getting down to it now. Week 12 in the NFL. It used to mean we were 3/4 of the way done. Now we got a little bit longer to go, obviously, with 17 games that we're playing, which is still crazy to think about. The fact that we're doing 17 games of football.
I know.
I wonder what's going to happen. And I haven't even looked to see if anybody's close to any type of records or anything like that might have some implications. But and we also joining us, as he usually is on Monday evening quarterback, we have our friend Robert Barnes. What's up, man?
How goes it, brother? How are you, my friend?
Well,
how were you thinking about that Alabama surviving this weekend?
I was not happy about that game. I was not happy at all. But I got some things to say. I mean, I made a video here on Sports Wars, and I was very opinionated about Nick Saban, who's the greatest of all time, as I've qualified. But I said, maybe spend less time trashing your fans and focusing on preparing for your opponent this week, Nick, because that was one of the worst prepared games I've ever seen Alabama play in since 2008. I mean, it was an ugly game, and we got lucky. Didn't deserve to win, but it was something.
A heck of a game.
It was. Too bad I couldn't enjoy it. I'm sure other people enjoyed it. I was too busy being stressed out the whole damn time.
I mean, what was it, a 97-yard drive to tie it with less than 2 minutes left?
Yeah, I think Bryce Young probably sealed up the Heisman on that drive.
Yeah, especially with Ohio State losing to Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was something, man. But yeah, good to have Robert back.
Yeah, absolutely. And we usually talk about NFL first on this show, but since we brought it up anyway, we might as well hop right into college football, because I do think that obviously rivalry weekend, coming down to it, establishing who's going to be in what championship game, I think a lot of attention was on college football this week for good reason. Vice just kind of the normal, regular, everyday thing in the NFL. And you talked about it, Alabama versus Auburn, the Iron Bowl. As Jeremy knows, it's always going to be a good game. It doesn't matter what the team's records are going into it. However, I think that even if you thought it was going to be a good game, I don't know if there was anyone that expected Alabama to not have put the ball in the end zone with about a minute left in the game and needing that long drive and a great throw and catch to actually score and tie it up and force overtime. And they're lucky they did. And, Auburn tried to hold them off as much as they could. Auburn could not move the football in the second half. They had no shot. There were no threat offensively, and not an impressive win for Alabama.
It would have been an embarrassing loss against Auburn's backup quarterback, who also was injured in the game. So it's there are three decent road. I mean, they were 20-point favorites in the game. I had Auburn on the points, not on the money line. I'm sure some people, were probably heartbroken that might have had that, whatever it was, 10-1, 12-1, 15-1 for Auburn to win. Thought they had it in the bag with Auburn at the 3-yard line with less than 2 minutes left. I mean, Alabama at the 3-yard line. But I think, in fact, Auburn had at one point a 99.89% chance of winning that game. Then the running back gets thrown out of bounds. That allows the clock to go to get stopped. And then, heck of a drive, especially Auburn, even without Malzahn, is still Saban's nemesis.
Yes.
I mean, they've pulled more upsets and held tighter games against Alabama than any other SEC foe. So it was, a big game. I think they're going to be 4 or 5 point underdogs. I haven't seen the spread yet this week, but that was what I heard the early line was good.
This will be the third time since 2008 that Alabama's been an underdog. That's insane. I mean, that is absolutely insane. And I know one of the other times was Georgia that that was the first time Alabama had been the underdog since I think 2008, and that was, what was that, 2012? I can't remember. And then they destroyed Georgia. I can't remember who the other underdog was. Maybe Clemson, but I'm not sure, or whoever the favorite was.
I think Florida 08 they were under. I think is the only time they haven't covered as an underdog. The year Urban Meyer won his second championship with Tim Tebow.
Crazy. That is insane. But here's the thing, and this is how I do think there is a positive spin to put on this for Alabama. Clearly, Georgia is the best football team in the country, and nobody can deny that. They are the best football team, and they have wiped out everybody in their path. Alabama just strolling into this game, they're not going to beat Georgia just straight up. They're just not. Now, what we know about Nick Saban is that he's the master of manipulation. If the media is overpraising his team, then he does the rat poison speech, and he kind of tears his team down. It's the same way he coaches. So like during the game, if you watch Nick Saban, if they're up 56-3 with 2 minutes to go, he's screaming his head off at people, acting like the game is on the line. Whereas if you watch him in tight games, he's more of a motivator at that point. He's not screaming at people. So he adapts to whatever the situation is. So him taking this pathetic performance from Alabama and turning that into the motivation they need is the best case scenario for Alabama going in this game. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I'm saying that if in a perfect world, it's better that Alabama went through this than to beat Auburn down 45-0 or something like that, because Alabama could potentially go in that overconfident, which is a thing Alabama has done in the past with playing teams like Utah, which I don't know if they were overconfident as much as they were just checked out of that game. But it's the best case scenario for Saban in terms of his manipulation and how he can get the team motivated. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think Georgia doesn't deserve to be favorites. I mean, an all-time great defense, but I still don't believe in the backup quarterback, and so.
They are Georgia. They are from Georgia, and what the Falcons and the Bulldogs have taught us is that it doesn't matter if they're favored or if they're in a great position. They're typically going to fuck it up. So we'll see what happens. Sorry to interrupt you, Robert.
I think Alabama has to win for sure to get in. They might be able to get in with 2 losses, but there'd be a lot of controversy if that happens. So I think Alabama needs to win to get into the playoffs in all likelihood. I think Georgia's in no matter what. Even they lose to Bama, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
But then Michigan right now would be and Cincinnati are the other two. But yeah, I mean, Michigan against Iowa in a Big Ten title game, I don't know if I would bank on Michigan taking care of business. And then the question would become, if Michigan loses, I guess they put Notre Dame in next. And then that would be if Alabama. And then what happened if Alabama lost? Who would be the team to replace them? Because who right now is like number 6 or going in would be, I guess, whoever was 7th, I guess, because Oklahoma lost.
It's tough because you have sitting here, Harbaugh finally beats Ohio State. And I think you also on this program last week, Robert, you said that you had I think you had Michigan in the points. If I'm remembering right, you had them to cover, obviously not to beat them by 20. But, Michigan takes care of business at home. First time Harbaugh's ever done that to Ohio State, which is big.
11 years since Michigan has won, beat Ohio State in their big rivalry.
If you listen to El Presidente, it's like they've been winning for the last 11 years. So.
Any Michigan fan, they are like over the moon. They're talking mad shit, and hey, it's the first time they've been able to in a while. So what are you gonna do?
I know it. But Portnoy leans into that so much all the time. Last year, he said Cam was going to take him to the Super Bowl after like one game. So that's just what he does.
That's true. It's not wrong. And when we look at the college football playoff rankings, this was, of course, going in. Well, I guess this is not. That's the AP. We don't have the new college football rankings yet. Let's go week 13, and we'll have the college football playoff rankings. So this was going into the week. Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Cincy.
So if Alabama and Michigan lose, it's probably Notre Dame. And if Oklahoma, the winner of the Big 12 goes.
That would probably be the only logical thing. I think we have to see how far Ohio State falls. That would be an interesting equation. If Michigan State like if Michigan State loses,
if it's possible for Notre Dame to get in, they're going to get in. If there's any scenario where they can get Notre Dame in, they're going to get Notre Dame in there. We know that.
I think if either Michigan or Alabama loses, Notre Dame will jump in. And I think that'll be a weak final. I mean, if for any reason Alabama or Michigan's not in, I think it's a really weak Final Four. Because you'd have a weak Big 12 champion in Oklahoma State or Baylor, and then you'd have a Notre Dame team that really has struggled to get by a lot of games this year, and a Cincinnati team that's just a lower division team. I mean, they've had a great season, but still not in the same tier as those other teams. Like, I don't think Cincinnati ranks in the top 25 in recruiting rankings.
Yeah, Cincinnati's going to get smoked if they end up in this playoff. They're going to get smoked by whoever they play.
Yeah, they were lucky last year to be close with Georgia. Georgia made a bunch of mistakes. If you looked at it statistically, Georgia beat the daylights out of them in that game. It just didn't show up on the scoreboard for a range of reasons. But if you know I mean, it would be. Whereas if it's right now, it's going to be Georgia, Alabama, Cincy, and Michigan. Cincy, I assume, would be fourth. That'll be an easy win for Georgia. And then it's whoever the final is. Alabama, Michigan would be a fun semifinal. I think that's a bad matchup for Michigan. Though Alabama's defense has not been the same since Kirby Smart left.
That's true. And I mean, the play calling this year has been questionable on offense. I mean, Alabama's not. This is not the Alabama. Like, they're still Alabama. They're still a Nick Saban coach team. They still have incredible talent. There's no doubt about it, but they are not as deep as they have been. And look, I think Bryce Young is a fantastic prospect, but he makes mistakes. Like, he does make mistakes. His numbers are phenomenal. And so if you just look at his numbers, they're absolutely insane, but it is a Nick Saban team that, you know, typically every quarterback looks good. And so, yeah, you have the people like even Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, their numbers were insane. But even going back prior to them, you had, you know, Jalen Hurts looked like which again, it's hard for me to say anything bad because he still is an NFL starting quarterback today. I never thought that would happen. But,
I mean, kind of.
Jalen Hurts looked phenomenal at times in that offense. So Bryce Young is a really good quarterback. He's got a lot of talent and a lot of promise, but he does make mistakes here and there that concern me. So this is not a dominant Alabama team by any stretch, but
no.
The gap is there's still Georgia, Alabama, and kind of everybody else, it feels like. You know, it's just that gap's not as wide as it was between Alabama and everyone else.
And if Georgia's quarterback play, if I trusted it more, I would say, you know, Georgia would be a tier above everybody. Because they're finally, I think they'll be healthy for the first time all season, to some degree. I mean, they've had so many guys banged up earlier in the year, well, especially on the skill positions, wide receiver and tight end. I think they're almost all back, but I'm just not a Stetson Bennett fan, and he got exposed by Alabama last. This game will show has this 3-star quarterback who's, you know, basically managed a very talented run game and ridiculously talented defense. Has he changed from last year? Because last year was the Alabama game that exposed him. I'm not sold on him yet. And if the USC transfer can come in and make plays, then I think they're back to, you know, a likely favorite. I mean, they were my preseason pick to win it all. But I would like to get better quarterback play. Otherwise, they're still they're not like LSU 2019 or some of those teams that you're like, I can't see this team losing. All of these teams I can see losing and getting knocked off. So it's going to be a fun conference championship postseason because Michigan can lose, Oklahoma State can lose, I think Georgia will lose in the SEC championship. I guess the Pac-12 is Oregon and Utah. That should actually be a fun game. Oregon has a way of winning those Pac-12 championships no matter how they get there of late.
And now, didn't Oregon just lose to Utah?
They got crushed at Utah.
Not that long ago. So
and they're passing. And you know, Utah, once they fixed their QB situation, was really became quite good. If they'd fixed that earlier in the year, they might be in the hunt. Oregon never got their offense with consistency enough to get over the hump, despite the early upset of Ohio State. But you know, the Pac-12, a lot of places are going to be interesting as the coaching the coaching changes take place. What's really interesting to me is I believe that USC was a better job than LSU or Florida. And the reason for that is twofold. One, they don't play Alabama every year or Georgia every year. USC has the second. They have the biggest natural talent advantage recruiting wise in the country by a long mile. The USC only competes with UCLA meaningfully. The Arizona schools kind of, but LA they dominate football branding in Southern California. It's always been ridiculously talent rich, especially at quarterback, which is what Lincoln Riley's looking for. It's interesting that Riley made that same choice. He turned down LSU, he turned down Florida, but he said yes to USC as soon as Oklahoma was out of the playoff hunt. And I think that was a smart move on him. Oklahoma going into the SEC is going to be tough. Because you look at their recruiting. If you just look at recruiting advantages, Oklahoma is going to finish middle of the pack in the SEC, towards like 4th or 5th or 6th. They don't have the recruiting edge that Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Georgia, or Florida have. So, I mean, they should, if all those schools have equal level recruiters, Oklahoma's 6th, and really they're going to be 7th behind Texas. The Texas is the one that can really make a play in the SEC if they actually start capitalizing off of their recruiting advantage in that state. But neither of those programs is quite what USC is. And I think Lincoln Riley made a smart choice, especially his quarterback driven system. There's no better place for quarterbacks in Southern California from a high school recruiting perspective, in terms of bevy of talent, because the weather permits them to develop really good quarterbacks from a passing perspective. So I think that was interesting. And then LSU turned down the local native, Billy Napier, and Florida grabbed him fast, which I don't know if that's the best choice for Florida. The big question is, can he recruit in Florida? He's never, he recruited decently in Louisiana, but whether he can recruit in Florida, that's been their problem. They've only had one successful coach since Spurrier left. And that was one of the greatest college football recruiters of all time in Urban Meyer.
Right.
And even Meyer left because he thought Florida's expectations were excessive. And he preferred Ohio State to Florida.
And now where's Urban Meyer going to end up? Because we know he's not going to be in Jacksonville next year. So
yeah, I mean, 2-9. I mean, it's not like the NFL experiment is really working. I don't think USC wanted Urban Meyer. They wanted a pro style passing offense. They always have. Well, that's their.
Urban Meyer's going to have to go somewhere. And again, I know we're speculating. He could still be in Jacksonville next year. I do not think he will be. But, I mean, Urban Meyer is not a long-term solution anywhere, and he's proven that. He's going to go somewhere for a few years, and then he's going to have a heart attack, or he's going to have something's going to happen. But Lincoln Riley in USC is a pretty freaking perfect fit.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to turn the Pac-12 upside. USC should be a top 5 program every year. Their recruiting advantage is so strong. I mean, they're there with – Alabama was put in Tuscaloosa because it was in the equidistance, about a half day's drive from all of the rich cotton black belt, which is where your disproportionate amount of rural, small-town Southern talent comes from. It can dip into East Georgia. It can dip into Southern Tennessee. It can dip into Western Mississippi. And, of course, it pretty much owns, outside of a very small area, the state of Alabama. Mm-hmm. So, Alabama was always a program that should be a top 5 program. Texas and LSU, arguably, Georgia, arguably, Ohio State, but USC is right there. You can argue Texas at times. It's dependent on the year as to Texas's talent, but Texas has to compete with Texas Tech, Texas A&M, TCU, SMU, Houston, historically, and Baylor. And it has to deal with Oklahoma, which can dip into Dallas in recruiting terms. So Riley made the smart choice. He went to the most talent-rich program, also a place you're not going to get a lot of media scrutiny. It's LA, so that's why scandals at USC are second-tier stories. They're not first-tier stories. And every other college football powerhouse, in Knoxville, in Tuscaloosa, Gainesville, the football program is the story of the town. Not USC. You're category 5. Below the celebrities and all the rest. So you can have whatever scandals you want. Nobody's going to care.
I think it's going to be really easy. Like you said, that talent there, Robert, it's going to be very easy for Lincoln Riley to look at all these guys in California, and say, hey, look, I'm responsible for 10% of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts. Because I don't think if Jalen Hurts doesn't have that season at Oklahoma, he's not a starting quarterback in the NFL, bottom line. So that's a really good selling point. He can relate to all these guys. He's 37 years old. I think USC may finally have found the fix that they've been looking for since Pete Carroll left.
Yeah.
And it's good for college football if USC is good again. It's good for college football if the Pac-12 can get back to relevance, really.
I would love to see Alabama, USC in a college football playoff in the next couple of years once Lincoln Riley's really been able to rebuild that. I think that's, like you just said, it's good for college football. Absolutely.
And yeah, they can get good fast because there's so much talent out there, and because they're regular. Everybody else in the Pac-12 is 2 tiers beneath them in terms of recruiting abilities. The Bay Area, Stanford and Cal are about equal. Washington and Washington State split up Washington. Oregon State's doing better and better and competing with Oregon. Oregon has Nike money, so as long as it's got Nike money, it will be a top 10 recruiting program. But it's not naturally a top 5 program at all, or a top 20 program. It's only because of Nike that they go from like 30th to 10th. Though we'll see how long the Oregon coach stays around. If USC gets good, if I was the Oregon coach, I mean, he's looking at Miami anyway. But it means he must have turned him down, because the talk was Florida. That was Lincoln Riley was number 1, and the Oregon head coach was Florida's number 2 target, and same with LSU. And I'm sure it shocks LSU that they've had top tier people turn them down for USC or to stay at Oregon. The Nike money's a different, but he may be waiting for the Miami job to open where he played in college. So, but I mean, Oklahoma is talking about trying to steal Kingsbury from the Cardinals. If you're Kingsbury, do you leave the Cardinals for Oklahoma?
That's listen, that story, I guarantee, is from Cliff Kingsbury's agent. There is no way that Oklahoma is realistically going to draw him away from the Cardinals. It'd be one thing if the Cardinals were like 3-10, but they're 9-2. And they haven't even had Kyler Murray the past several games. Like,
have we ever seen that? Possible. Have we ever seen an NFL coach in a competing team leave from a competing team?
Because Pete Carroll was fired when he went to USC, and Nick Saban was about to get fired at the Dolphins when he went to Alabama.
So I don't think we've ever seen a pro coach that's on a team that's doing really well and is in playoff contention and making playoffs leave to go to, it doesn't matter what school. Not even Texas could pull that off, and Texas is the most money in college football. Nobody can pull that off.
Wouldn't it be crazy if Cliff Kingsbury goes from getting fired at Texas Tech to becoming a head coach in the NFL, and then he leaves first place team NFL to go to Oklahoma? There's no way.
It would have to be a crazy check. But you know whose name is not being ballied about that I think might be back in the. I think a smart program that's willing to take the political risk, and a lot of these programs don't really have political risk because of the nature of the politics, is John Gruden. Gruden used to be a hot topic in college football. He always wanted to be back in the NFL.
Always Tennessee. Tennessee was always rumored. Always rumored.
And rumor is that Oklahoma wants to make a run at Josh Heupel because of his Oklahoma ties and because of his success this year at Tennessee. Offensively, finished second in the league. Offensively, which is statistically,
I didn't think about that.
That's an impressive performance. He had the biggest number of transfers leave of any program in the country, biggest number of top 100 transfers leave of any program in the country. No returning quarterback, totally new system, and now he may get the extra benefit of. I think he'll stay at Tennessee, or at least Dylan Gabriel, who he had at UCF, who put up huge numbers under him, is transferring out of UCF from Malzahn's offense. And I assume he's going to go wherever Heupel goes. I don't think Heupel's jump ship from Tennessee right away like this. That would burn some people. But, because Kiffin did the same thing when USC came calling 1 year in. But you can't completely rule it out because Heupel's had this back-to-back success. Oklahoma's his home program. Oklahoma has a better recruiting advantage than Tennessee. The hard part with Tennessee is there's not a lot of talent within a half day's drive of Knoxville. There just ain't. There's only so much talent in Western North Carolina and Eastern Middle Tennessee, and the West Virginia and places like that. That can really, in the western parts of Virginia, Tennessee should be 8th or 9th each year in the SEC, somewhere around there, just from a talent perspective. I mean, are you really going to out-recruit Nick Saban in Alabama? Are you going to out-recruit Kirby Smart in Georgia? You're probably not even going to out-recruit Shane Beamer in South Carolina. And you're not going to recruit Mac in North Carolina now, and NC State's good. And so many good programs in the surrounding regions Tennessee's always going to be a mid-tier program that needs an unusual coach to overachieve. If you're Heupel, Oklahoma's a better gig if they write a big enough check. But maybe John Gruden comes home to Knoxville in that case.
Hey, listen, we've seen people with visors have a lot of success. Have a lot of success in Oklahoma, so they might be bringing that visor back.
So let me throw a scenario at you. We know who likes to take damaged goods and revive them. What do we think about maybe Saban hires Gruden for a year as offensive coordinator?
Yeah,
I'm just
that
saying,
wouldn't surprise me at all. And look at the Raiders' offense. I mean, they had a good game against Dallas last week, but before that, Gruden showed that his fingerprints mattered.
If you remember,
he'd be perfect. So he brought Sarkisian back after Sarkisian was fired
Lane
because
Kiffin,
he liked to drink a little.
Kiffin was untouchable. Nobody was touching Lane Kiffin. He was, and I'm using it unironically for once, toxic. Nobody was touching Lane Kiffin. When Saban hired him, I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
I think Gruden's a little bit different.
I do too. I do,
stature.
But he is. But considering what he's been through, nobody
he needs a bounce back.
I don't think anybody would hire John Gruden right now, not a university as the head coach. They wouldn't because of the social climate, the social media aspect of it. But I do believe Nick Saban. Let's just say, all right, so if Bill O'Brien is going to be some hot water if Alabama gets waxed versus Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he's gone. Now, so who do you have now? Who are your options? John Gruden would be an option for Saban. I'm not saying I believe it, but if what Robert's saying that for Gruden to get to Tennessee, it would need to be a year under Saban, under the radar. Saban would take the criticism. They'd probably win the national championship. Then Gruden leaves and he becomes the head coach somewhere in college or pro. I'm just saying, I don't think it's happening, but if we're entertaining crazy ideas, I could see that.
I mean, if Liberty could hire Hugh Freeze after he got caught with strippers or escorts on his phone, and I mean, the Baptist College, and, Louisville could hire Bobby Petrino after his girlfriend on the payroll at Arkansas. I think 10-year-old emails are enough for John Gruden to overcome because he's John Gruden. Yeah. If he has the right place, right program. And, offensive coordinator at Alabama or some big prestige gig, that somebody that's willing to give him a second lease on life. And he and his brother hired a lot of people in the NFL. So they have some people that owe them. And Lane Kiffin benefited from all the chips that his dad had built up over the years, including, being in part of mentor to young defensive coach Nick Saban. So that resuscitated his career. And now he's back in this is a guy who got fired at the Raiders, fired at Tennessee, fired at USC, and now is a hot topic of people saying maybe he should go to Florida. I think he'd be a I think Florida decided no because still too much baggage with Kiffin's name. Though we'll see if LSU does the same thing. I mean, LSU doesn't care. Louisiana just cares about football. They don't care what your past is. And I think college football has a little more leeway than the NFL does in terms of politics of who gets hired. I don't think Gruden has any chance to make it back to the league. I think any future in football coaching has to come at the college ranks.
And we have to point out that John Gruden will have a lawsuit going against the NFL probably throughout all of next year. Whether he wants to coach during that or not, I guess we'll see. I will say that obviously you pointed out a lot of those other controversies these coaches have been through. I don't think that accurately describing Roger Goodell in an email from a few years ago, I don't think that's the end of the world for him. I think he'll be okay.
And he was just rightly critical of a bunch of BS that the NFL had pulled, that their ratings are just now finally recovering from all the crazy politics of the past 3, 4, 5, 10 years, really sporadically.
You're telling me like South Carolina or something. I'm just throwing it out there, right? You're telling me that South Carolina is going to have a problem hiring John Gruden because he called Kaepernick a woke piece of shit and criticized social justice? I don't think so.
Especially college football fans are Let's Go Brandon fans. They're like NASCAR fans.
That's right.
As much as NASCAR likes to fancy itself because of Tom Cruise being in one movie as some sort of national brand that's politically correct, it isn't the core of their brand. And college football is the same way. And there's plenty of the big donors. I mean, the TV networks have a little bit of influence, and that's the biggest restraint on Gruden getting hired at the collegiate ranks. But they have nowhere near the influence that the big donors have. And the big donors in the South just don't care. And in places like Oklahoma, they don't care. They don't care about somebody's politics being, he said the things those donors, I guarantee you, have said it in their little conversations over the years.
Yes.
About, women in sports and picking people solely because they're gay. And, if a woman's the best referee, God bless, have her out there. But that isn't why the NFL was promoting it. The NFL was promoting it because they wanted to say, look, we have women referees. Yes, Sam wasn't drafted because of his talent and ability. He was drafted because they wanted to say, look, we drafted a gay player. There's been plenty of gay players in the NFL. It's not like, that's a total secret.
John Gruden coached one. Yeah, he did. Carl Nassib. He probably coached a lot of them, but he coached Carl Nassib.
I thought you were going to say someone else, but while we're on the topic of hot takes for who should be coaches for universities, how about this one right here? I'm all for this one. Give me Tim Tebow at Florida, baby. All right. Bring the GOAT back to college. I like it. RG3 finally with a good take. I'm okay with that. What do you think about that?
I think he would be popular pick at some level at Florida. Maybe start him out as a position coach, see how he recruits. It's always been the same thing with Eli Manning at Ole Miss, Peyton Manning at Tennessee. They've always wanted him to come. Now, those guys would really fit because their analysis on ESPN on Monday night is so much better than any other analysis that ESPN ever has. Yeah. Their breakdown of game tape. I actually understood the Ravens defense for the first time. I was like, oh, that's why they're different. So those guys are just at a different level than everybody else. But I wonder if, it's interesting that some of these big players have not sought out coaching gigs of recent vintage. Like, 10, 15 years ago, it was pretty frequent that somebody's a great player, turned around, became an assistant someplace, worked their way up. Brett Favre is, likes to coach high school football in Mississippi as an assistant. Doesn't want to be a head coach, apparently. I thought he would be a great Southern Miss head coach, bring back that used to be a quality program. Cincinnati level where Cincinnati is now. Back in the day, back when he was there, he kept beating Bobby Bowden, who couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. But it's the broadcasting game, Robert. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's the fact that these guys are walking into these broadcasting gigs where Drew Brees had one already lined up before he officially retired.
I bet John Gruden wished he would have stayed in the broadcasting booth. He would have had easy money. His ego is why he went back to coaching, and the NFL didn't want him in coaching. And they punished him because they knew, that he had been critical of them behind the scenes of a whole bunch of things. But I agree that a guy like Romo would clearly be a great coach. His analysis, his ability to break things down, predict plays, but I don't think he ever will. He's got 10 million reasons just to sit there and talk in the booth.
Yep. The problem is there's way more to coaching than just being able to break down what's going on in the field in front of you. It's all this day to day. It's a grind. Like it's a lot of intense shit. And it takes a special breed of person to want to do that. And also to know all the things you have to do and to go through recruitment process and get all the right people in place for it. And you see Deion Sanders, who took the Jackson State job. How much time do we really think he's spending as a normal head football coach would there? Or how much is he just kind of almost a figurehead and kind of clap, clap, rah, rah type of thing, and there for recruiting purposes, Yeah. So it's a lot more than just knowing the game.
And I don't necessarily think Tebow would make I wouldn't hire Tim Tebow as a head coach of the University of Florida, but I do think that's something they will consider because I think that they're going to have trouble
hired
getting
somebody.
So, I'm saying from a big name standpoint, though, because none of these big names are going to come in. They're not going to last. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to. Right. The SEC is a blender for Nick Saban, basically. That's all it is.
I'm curious how Billy Napier does at Florida. We'll know quickly because if he gets out there, it makes noise on the recruiting trail, and not so much. It's tough with the early commitments in this cycle to do well right away, but you'll know because they'll be picking up junior recruits for the next class. Yeah. On paper, Napier I thought wasn't he seems like another Dan Mullen, just hasn't performed as well as Dan Mullen has at the stage Dan Mullen has. That's a creative offensive mind, who overachieves at lower programs.
Well, they really fell apart this last little part of the season. They look like a goddamn mess now.
Well, it's also Mullen's never been a great recruiter. Great offensive mind, never been a great recruiter. And the hard part now is the nationalization of college football recruiting. It's still primarily a regional basis, but it's more national now. It used to be 80% of players would not – I call it half day's drive from mama's cooking. That in college football, 80% of your players would not go more than a half day's drive from where their home is. That's now like around 60%. And it's because college football is becoming so professionalized. And in your real talent-rich states like Florida, Texas, and California, but especially Florida and Texas, like for a California kid to go all across the country, that's a much bigger deal than for a Florida kid to go to Georgia or a Florida kid to go to Clemson or a Florida kid to go to Alabama. That's not that big a deal. That's just a day's drive rather than a half day's drive. And so Florida's become tougher. It's not as easy to just recruit. And that's what Mullen found out. He couldn't just set up shop and get the same talent Florida always got. And Zook was a good recruiter. He just was not a good coach. Meyer was both, but Meyer couldn't handle the pressure. I mean, that's why I can't see Meyer going to LSU. He didn't like playing Alabama every other year in the SEC title. He wants to play them every year. Yeah. And especially the expectations at LSU now are national title or bust. Ed Orgeron got fired 2 years after the greatest season in LSU history.
Yeah. One of the greatest seasons in college football history right there.
Yeah.
And he's gone. And
that's because their last three coaches have all won national titles. You got crazy expectations there in Louisiana.
Yep.
I mean, so much so that they thought Napier was a step down. That's why he's at Florida, not at LSU. I'm curious who they're waiting. I think they were hoping that Lincoln Riley would come. And now that's going to be infamous. Lincoln Riley's statement of, I'm not going to LSU. You don't have to ask the question. Apparently they asked the wrong 3-letter acronym university.
Yeah.
And you know, he was
24 hours. That was 24 hours before he accepted the USC job.
Yeah, it's like, I'm telling you, never LSU. You didn't ask about USC. I told you never LSU. You know, that was a giveaway in the end, because normally what a coach says is, I'm committed to being here. I'm not going anywhere. Not, I'm not going to this specific place.
Yep.
Maybe LSU thinks they can steal the Cincinnati head coach. That's got to be my guess, is that there's some big name that they're waiting on, and they're gambling that they're going to improve on Orgeron, because Orgeron was a great recruiter, and really he just had issues sporadically with coordinators. But recruiting was never a problem for Ed Orgeron. Now I think
when it comes to recruiting too, Robert, something we probably haven't talked about enough this year is the fact that now players can get paid.
And LOIs and the transfer portal. You combine the two, the ball game. Michigan State went from being a losing team to briefly in the playoff hunt solely because of the transfer portal. Transfer portal is changing the game entirely.
Yeah. And I think that for Lincoln Riley,
Tennessee compete right away, because they got two decent prospects in the court, only because they could immediately transfer and play. And one of them panned out. So we'll see. And maybe there's some, NFL coaches, but I thought in terms of but I don't see Kingsbury going anywhere, not with the way Arizona's playing.
No.
And there's nobody else that's an actual desirable NFL coach that I see that would be fired, that's going to be looking at the collegiate ranks. And will, I don't see the Andy Reids of the world ever coaching college. So I think the ego and the stature, the only reason you'd ever do that is money. That you can right now still make more money. What does Saban make at Alabama? It's more than $10 million a year, isn't it?
And then he's got incentives on top of it. So I mean, he's making. Last I heard, it was over 10. But then, if I'm not mistaken, now I haven't kept up with it in a few years, but I feel like Les Miles a few years ago, prior to Ed O coming there, I think Les Miles got more than him, like on paper, but then with the incentives and stuff. But Saban has more power than any coach in professional sports or college sports. I mean,
the only edge college has is you can offer, like James Franklin has now an $80 million buyout if they were to fire him next year. $80 million buyout. Ooh. So, that's what college money is. The only temptation and a little bit more stability. In the NFL, if you stink for 2 years, you're gone. In college, you can probably go 3 years before you're gone. You get a little bit more breathing room. But the downside is college, you have to recruit. You don't have to recruit at all in the NFL. All you got to do is coach week in, week out. But you see Urban Meyer, he much prefers recruiting to coaching because he's like, his complaint is that at Jacksonville, he's like, it's like playing Alabama every week. You know, I mean,
everybody's got the same talent.
Urban Meyer wants 1 or 2 tough games a year, 9 or 10 fun. Where I think Urban Meyer would go is if Florida State fires their coach. I don't think they will this year. But I could see him at Florida State because then he's in the ACC. He's got a talent-rich program. He's got Clemson maybe and Miami, but it's not near. That's more like Ohio State and playing Michigan and Michigan State and Penn State. It's not like being at LSU where you're going to have Alabama, where you're going to have Florida. They have Alabama and Florida every year on their schedule at LSU. I mean, that's not a desirable position for me.
I just looked it up. So highest paid coaches, shockingly, Ed O is second. So Saban at 9.7 million. Ed O second at 9 million. David Shaw 8.9. Dabo Sweeney 8.3, and Lincoln Riley at 7.6. So
Lincoln Riley's now up over 10 million.
David Shaw didn't earn that money this year. He went 0-8 on the spread down the record. Now he's made me a lot of money over the years, but at Stanford was atrocious this year.
They were bad.
There you go.
But we'll see. But yeah, I think it was a fun weekend in college football. It was a lot of news, more news in college football than in the NFL. Though some great games in the NFL. I mean, I don't know why the Packers were an underdog at home or pick them at home. It's
the Rams
Green Bay after November, after Thanksgiving.
The Rams have been the darlings of the spread, right? Like they've been over-favored in nearly every game. Now they have covered sometimes because of that offense, but they've been over-favored. Let me run through a couple of these super chats, get a couple of these questions, and then we'll move on to NFL, guys. Chris Coran for 2 says, go Bucks. We're going to talk about those Bucks in just a second. The Matrix and Road Show, our man John Matrix is here, says, what's up, guys? Enjoying the show while I clean my kitchen. Thank you, John. And then he renews that membership for 13 months. By the way, Space Jam 2 lost money.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I'm about to add that to the outro. Solo lost money. Space Jam 2 lost money. Eternals lost money. Shang-Chi lost money. And we will talk to you later.
That's right.
That's what it's got to be.
Lar 1996 for $20. Thank you, Lar. Always dropping $20 bombs while he's taking care of business. Appreciate it, man. And then Ryan Bowdoin for $10. What if the Cardinals get bounced in the first round this year? Maybe Kingsbury takes a job paying 2 to 3 times.
Money is the only reason he'd think about it, but I can't. He's got a young franchise quarterback at a program that's in the NFL, and that's where all these coaches love to prove themselves. Now, I think Lincoln Riley, by going to USC, maybe he's not thinking NFL short term. But Nick Saban, I think, is more of there's certain coaches. Urban Meyer should have stayed in college. Nick Saban's a college guy, not an NFL guy at this point in his career. He actually enjoys the aspects of recruiting. The reason why Bob Stoops, whose name is back being bandied about, will coach Oklahoma in the playoffs is because of but the reason why he quit is he didn't like recruiting. There's a lot of the people that are at the NFL, like there's people who think they're going to get the Carolina Panthers head coach who coached at Baylor and Temple, Matt Rule, to come back to college. A lot of these guys, number one, they value the stature of being in the NFL. It's just seen differently. And number two, a lot of them hate recruiting. If you're like, I think Dan Mullen would do very well in the NFL probably. Because Dan Mullen's
a great coordinator. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes and is offense coordinator for somebody next year and then maybe head coach a couple years after that.
Yes, and I think he'd probably be a good NFL coach because his temperament is an NFL temperament. Saban is unusual in that you could see him being successful over time in the NFL if he really put the effort into it. But he enjoyed the control he has over college athletes in ways he doesn't have at the NFL level. You know, There's certain you can tell a college athlete a bunch and really be a mentor, but also be a disciplinarian. NFL, they're going to do what they're going to do. They usually get the bigger paychecks than you as a coach. Right. And even with the LOIs, that will never be the case in college football. So I think I don't think there'll be as much overlap. It's going to be the rare, Pete Carroll's very unique. He was a very sociable guy who was actually a great recruiter. But what did he do once he got the chance? He ran back to the NFL as soon as he could. So, the kind of people that want to coach in the NFL really don't want to coach in college. The guys that are coaching in college generally don't want to coach as much in the NFL. Like people brought up the Iowa State head coach. I don't see the Iowa State head coach moving because he likes his gig there. And the money has changed. Even at Iowa State now, you can make $4 or $5 million or whatever it is. I mean, when you're making that kind of money and you got a stable program and a bunch of alumni who like you, why gamble on another program? So you almost have to recruit from the coordinator ranks or the lower levels. Your Josh Heupels, your people like that. They were at Central Florida. Now, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think they'll look at him. But I would be curious whether LSU looks at Gus Malzahn. He was mostly successful at Auburn.
He was.
It's just he was in the shadow of Saban. It was such a big shadow. Now LSU has never got over losing Saban either. So there's that dynamic that's present. But we'll see. But I think the NFL ranks. I think you're starting to see real divergence. The only thing college football offers is that you can actually make more money and have a better guarantee of payment at college than you do in the NFL, which is kind of crazy that it's gone that way.
Yeah. And we have another super chat real quick from Ryan Badoon, or I don't know how to say that, Bodoon. I'm not sure, but $5. Dan Mullen, OC for the Cowboys next year when Kellen Moore leaves for some head coach gig, if it opens up, because obviously Dan Mullen does have a history with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, he does. Yes. That would make a lot of sense. And Kellen Moore is definitely getting a head coaching gig. That guy is legit.
Yeah. But when it comes to the games that we had on Sunday, Matthew Stafford doesn't quite look the same after getting injured, after getting banged up as he did the first half of this season. And the Rams showed that. I think they're also probably missing Robert Woods a little bit. Odell Beckham Jr. just really isn't the person that he was a few years ago. He's not some major impact on the field anymore. I don't know if it was the injuries. I don't know if it's his attitude. I don't know what it is. But the Rams do not look like that high efficiency, high octane energy or offense that they were early in the season. And they lost to the Packers at Green Bay.
They really needed Cam. They really need their running game because that offense is so predicated on the run working that when they don't have Cam Akers and they don't have that power run game working, that offense stalls repeatedly. And that's been true no matter who's been the quarterback. It's been true almost no matter where that system has been employed. To a certain degree, Cleveland has aspects of that. When their running game is not working, they have performances like they did against the Ravens this past weekend. So that system is so heavily predicated on the running game, and they've never fully recovered from Gurley getting hurt and fading out. They really, Akers has the potential to be that kind of guy. He'll never be quite where Gurley was, but I think Stafford needs that. The other factor is an old betting trick has always been warm weather teams that go to cold weather environments after Thanksgiving are bad bets. And the Rams are still a warm weather team, and Green Bay after Thanksgiving is a real tough place to win. And I think people thought Rodgers was more banged up than he really was. He just sat out because he could sit out because he's Aaron Rodgers. He was not going to miss the Rams game. That wasn't going to happen, especially with home field advantage for the postseason possibly being in play. So I think that I had money on the Packers and the over, so I was happy both ways. But I think the Rams are still, what's interesting is you really have the three best teams in the league are really all in the NFC. Tampa Bay with Tom Brady, Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and the Rams with Matthew Stafford. And I think that all three will hit their hiccups for different reasons at different points in the season. But when they're all, particularly if they're all healthy come playoff time, that's going to be that's probably the three best teams in the NFC almost in a while. I mean, teams that have all three have solid defenses. All three have elite quarterbacks. All three have smart offensive coordinators. And that doesn't, you still have Dallas hanging in there, but I can't take their coaching as seriously. They, again, lost to the Raiders on Thanksgiving. That looked like they'd been in the tank because they played too much man defense all game against Derek Carr.
They got beat so bad, Mike McCarthy got COVID. So,
yeah.
Well, exactly. I think this game, to me, said more about Green Bay than anything. Green Bay is looking really good. And at this point in the season right now, and again, I'm not saying looking all the way forward, but like right now, Green Bay does look like they're the best team in the NFL. The Buccaneers are going through their I mean, it's a Tom Brady team. Tom Brady teams typically go through this midway, late into the season until you get to that heat up point. So the Bucs look a little off, but they do have some injuries going on. You don't have Antonio Brown in there, but Green Bay looks good. Green Bay looks really, really good right now, and I think they are the best team in the NFL right now. And it seems like they're playing really good. And for all of the problems this year with Aaron Rodgers in terms of just the the off-season controversy, and then the whole nonsense that happened a few weeks ago with him and the coof or whatever, it seems to me like, and again, just from afar, it seems like there's better chemistry from a team leadership standpoint with Rodgers than ever before. On that, they just seem to have a better. They're gelling together from afar. It seems to me.
Well,
so I don't know if that's.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is healthy, and to the credit, bring back Randall Cobb was great. Yes, because Cobb is a safety blanket for him as a backup to Devontae Adams.
Comfortable with him.
A.J. Dillon, the Boston College player, is catching the ball well out of the backfield, which really gives him another, almost like a mini tight end for Rodgers. And Rodgers looks as good as he's ever looked. Even banged up, there's just, he is as good as he's ever been. And the offense looks a little bit more like Rodgers' offense than the head coach's offense this season. But this is the same Packers team that, had they had a real home field last year with actual fans, probably wins the Super Bowl. They lost to Tampa Bay with that great Tampa Bay comeback, in large part because the weather wasn't too bad, but also because that was an empty stadium. And so I think if a full stadium, Green Bay is going to be really good. The Rams are going to be really good. Tampa Bay is going to be really good. Dallas could scare some people. But it's all the talent's really kind of shifted to the NFC because Mahomes has had a tough year in Kansas City.
A really bad
year. Josh Allen's a little up and down still with the Bills. I mean, so much so that with a rookie quarterback, Belichick is now in first place in the AFC East, which is a heck of an accomplishment.
Well, we're going to get a Bucs Patriots Super Bowl, and you're never going to hear from Uche again, which will make a lot of people on Twitter happy. Uche will just disappear forever when that happens.
That would be nice.
But no, I don't think the Patriots will make the Super Bowl. If you look at the teams they've beaten recently, and again, thankfully, I do have their defense on my fantasy team, and they have been killing it. But these teams are either depleted or they're just not very good. So again, I think the Patriots are looking really nice, but I don't think they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. But they may be. Yeah. You don't know.
I think they're a good team, but not he would have to do the greatest coaching job in the playoffs.
Although the AFC's really down. So
yeah.
I mean, right now you've got the Titans lost Derrick Henry, and they've lost everybody. It seems like KC is a shell of themselves right now. And you don't have really any Lamar Jackson. What did they threw 4 picks the other day?
They threw 4 picks, but like the Browns still couldn't overcome anything. And all these fucking idiots, all these people could talk about, Lamar Jackson, it's just impossible to sack him. Well, yeah, because if he's about to get sacked, he's throwing terrible ducks. So he's throwing through 4 picks. Everybody's just, he's just on another level, guys. You can't sack this guy. Chris Collinsworth, you fucking retard. Pissed me off so much last night. But yeah, you're right. You've got the AFC North, which is the Bengals, the Ravens. They're kind of separated themselves a little bit, which I like. I actually really like the Bengals. I like watching them, at least with Joe Burrow. Joe Mixon is he's on another level right now.
Mm-hmm. Another coach off the Rams coaching tree, off the Sean McVay coaching tree.
Yeah, that's right. It's crazy that a guy who's like 35 years old has a coaching tree, but
that is insane. Just insane.
It's the way it is.
Yeah, but you're right. The AFC is wide open, so anything can happen at this point unless Mahomes. I just can't imagine Mahomes and Reed not fixing it by season's end. As long as they get to be in the playoffs, I can't imagine that this guy who's been repeat MVP contender quarterback, was considered the future of the NFL. It won't get it back with probably who's tied with Belichick with the best spread record in the history of NFL and Andy Reid, that those guys don't get it back in time for the postseason. But who knows? But yeah, but at this point, all the talents loaded down in the NFC is where it looks like the real postseason action will be, unless Allen starts to hit his stride, unless Kansas City gets its groove back. Now, the Chargers, Denver's a tough place to play, smart defense there. The Chargers at times have flashed the potential to beat anybody, any place. Another coach that's off the Rams coaching tree. So they may get it back, but the AFC is still wide open. So it'll be Cincinnati could do it. You could still see Cleveland making a run. They need to make a run. They're 500 now going into the last third of the season. But they got more guys healthy. Kareem Hunt's back, some other people back. Maybe Baker Mayfield can hit his stride. And in the NFC,
he looked really bad.
Arizona is the best record in the NFC, and that's so it's been an interesting season, but it looks like right now the NFC has been a much more dominant conference than the AFC, like it was back in the 90s when all the talent, it was, Dallas and San Francisco or Dallas and Green Bay. That's who won the Super Bowl. You didn't care about the AFC very often. Just which AFC team was going to lose in the Super Bowl used to be.
Well, and then in the 2000s, getting into the 2000s and 2010s, you had all of a sudden Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Ben Roethlisberger. Those were just the guys. It was a very top-heavy AFC. You had these teams that you knew were going to be involved each and every year. Occasionally you'd have a Joe Flacco make it, but that was very few and far between when Tom Brady was dominating that conference.
Well, the most important thing that happened this weekend is that I've solidified myself as the best fantasy player in our Sports Wars League. I now have more points than Ryan as well. I am ranked number 1, and Ryan's very unhappy about it. But
it's only because has paid off for you guys this year in fantasy. Or who are the surprises that paid off, and who are the money makers?
So this is my first time playing fantasy ever. I've never wanted to get into it, and I'm regretting that because I'm having so much fun with it now. The funny thing is last week, because I had to bring another quarterback in because Mahomes was off last week, so I brought Mac Jones in. Last week, I only had 3 people on my starting team that weren't on the Patriots or the Bucks.
Wow.
But Jamar Chase has been fantastic for me this year.
That guy's Chase money.
Yeah, Jamar Chase has been huge, and so has Joe Mixon, because I've got Mixon and I've got Chase. But who's actually been the biggest surprise for me is because I chose this guy out of being a fan and not
Leonard Fournette.
Smart choice. Leonard Fournette. He got 46 points for me yesterday.
Yeah, he screwed me on the spread. That was a +3.5. Colts guaranteed. It's just going to be a full field goal, and that SOB has to run all the way in the end zone from like 35 yards out with a minute left.
Yeah. Well, they've been so banged up that they've utilized, and I think all the trust for, I forget what the backup's name is there, but I think all the trust for him has just gone out the window. They're just riding Leonard Fournette in a way that they did not do last year, especially in the passing game, because obviously Gronk was here last week, but he hasn't been there often. And when Gronk was gone, they almost utilized Fournette out of the backfield as like Gronk's targets. And he's been really
a beast
good
this year. He's been a beast. So I have had no injuries this year.
I've had a lot of fucking injuries.
Yeah. And like the biggest disappointment has been Patrick Mahomes. Even though he's put up really good numbers in a lot of games, there's been some games where he's got me like 7 points. Like that's happened like 3 times in the last month and a half. Probably he's been really bad. Really bad.
I have drafted great wide receivers. I actually have 5. You can only start 3, unfortunately for me. I have 5 of the top 15 wide receivers on my roster right now.
Do you have a Chicago Bears quarterback on your roster? Is that it?
Oh, God, no. I've got Kyler Murray, who's been injured the past 3 fucking games. I got Christian McCaffrey's bitch ass, who has been injured more often than he's played, and he just went on IR, so he's permanently done now for the rest of the fucking season. And I got Aaron Jones as my other starting running back, who's missed time as well.
Ryan probably has the best team this year, but injuries have really cost him.
I drafted really fucking well, but my injuries they've just finally caught up to me. I can't avoid it. I'm going to sneak into the playoffs, but
who did not, if they picked him up late, was not looking like the old MVP was Cam Newton this past week. Any hopes that Carolina uniform would bring back the fairy dust? Not so much, especially without Christian McCaffrey.
As a Bama fan, I found a lot of pride in watching that happen, especially after, the Auburn-Alabama game, and then to see Cam, who everybody's hyping up. Oh, he's back. It's Cam Newton.
That will still be my all-time favorite story, is that Alabama fan that bragged about poisoning the Toomer's Corner.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who named his kid like Bama. What did he name? Name one of them like Rolling Tide or Crimson.
Why have I forgot that guy's name? He called into the Paul Feinbaum show. We've made fun of him for so many years now. He recently pass away?
Maybe he did.
What is his name?
A buddy of mine had his one of his answers as their ringtone. Roll Damn Tide. That was
Roll Damn Tide. Roll Damn Tide. Roll Damn Tide. As he hung up the phone.
That
on
guy
the
was a true fan. The whole documentary on him was fantastic. I mean, but I always think
Somebody
of him when I
say
think
his
of Cam
name.
Newton. She's like that Scam Newton. They put that Scam Newton jersey on Bear Bryant's statue, and that's what inspired him to.
I have never in my life, as an Alabama fan, seen the anger that was created when Cam Newton, when they came back and beat us, because the first half of that game, like, Alabama dominated, like fucking dominated. It was, and then a lot of stupid things happened. You know, the Mark Ingram fumble, a lot of crazy things happened that led us to that game. And then, of course, Cam Newton running on the field and everything. There was so much anger towards Cam Newton. It was crazy. It was crazy. But yeah.
And I see the people in the chat say, don't draft McCaffrey. He's a glass of water. Listen, until last year, Christian McCaffrey played every fucking game in the NFL. He had a bad injury early last season. But the season before that, this motherfucker had 300 carries and 120 catches, had like 20 touchdowns.
Well,
and he's played 16 games his first 3 seasons.
For his longevity. McCaffrey at the Broncos. So you wouldn't expect him, and he's built like a guy that's not going to get hurt much. It's been a little bit. It's probably been a little bit of overutilization. Now the other factor,
agreed.
Running backs just don't last long. I mean, look at Todd Gurley a couple of years ago. Fantasy stud. I mean, it's just past 5. You get your Adrian Petersons, you get your Ezekiel Elliott's, but you don't get a lot of running backs that last past 5-6 years. I mean, that's why Elliott held out for the big contract. He knew that normally he doesn't last long. It's why running backs now get drafted 3rd round, 4th round, or later, because they know that there's not many Derrick Henrys running around, and even Derrick Henry got hurt this year.
Right? They're a dime a dozen. They really are, and there's not that much of a difference between your top tier elite running back in general. Not outside of the top 5 guys, like the rest of the 10, I guess, top running backs in the league. It's not much of a difference between that and the performance you can get by utilizing and doing rotation between 2 guys on the practice squad. We've just seen that play out time and time again. And I do think you have your exceptions. You have your Derrick Henrys. You do have your Christian McCaffreys. But even Dalvin Cook, Cook is a dominant runner. And he gets dinged up from time to time, is his little bit in the league that we've seen. And Mattinson came in and had like a hell of like 150-yard game or something crazy like that. It's just, we see that. Ezekiel Elliott.
No.
Is Ezekiel Elliott really worth the money they paid for him? I don't think so.
I mean, there's talk that they'll rest him this week on short notice, on rest. But I would note the other factor is the league has gone to great lengths to protect quarterbacks and wide receivers from injury and physical violence. They have not for running backs. So running backs get the brunt of all that physical violence in ways their quarterbacks and receivers don't. So they're in a different kind of position, and they touch the ball more often. I mean, good receiver will touch the ball 10 times in a game and often barely get hit when they often go down before they meaningfully get hit. Whereas a running back's getting hit 25, 30 times a game. And that's just a different animal, and it's not really sustainable injury-wise. And to lose guys like McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, the league might have to think about, how they handle some of those things, because those are star players that you're losing because of the degree of, physical contact that without losing the physical violence that is part of the league's identity and imagery that they've reduced over the years, but still have a lot of.
No, I think you should just not pay running backs that much. That's my personal opinion. They're going to get fucking used up like that. And it's just, it's very few and far between where these guys really have these long careers at an elite level. And a lot of that's, hey, Emmitt Smith, when you got a great offensive line, you can do things like that. But
unless you're a real killer like OJ, then you can last a little longer.
That is true. Unless you're a killer like OJ. We got a couple super chats here from John Kruger for 5. Brian Kelly to LSU announcement could come tomorrow.
That wouldn't surprise me because Notre Dame is tougher to recruit at. It would partially surprise me because he seemed like he was a lifer for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But not totally, because LSU is probably getting a little desperate right now. They I think really wanted Lincoln Riley, and this AD has put all of his eggs into this coaching choice. I mean, he wanted this AD gig for a while at LSU, so they need somebody like Kelly. Now the advantage for Kelly is at LSU, you really so dominates the entire state that you can be mediocre and recruit well at LSU. And because Kelly's been a decent recruiter, but never like a stellar recruiter, but decent.
And you can recruit really dumb people, which you can at Notre Dame. So
yeah, well, that's what you say about Auburn.
But
Auburn was so at Auburn you could be illiterate and get a degree. I mean, Ickey Woods was functionally illiterate, could not read or write, and he got a college degree from Auburn. So that tells you what. Though that I also said about SEC football, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. There's that sort of aspect to recruiting. All's fair in winning football games. But I think Kelly would be a big name hire.
It's a good fit. It's a good fit.
Yeah, he is, and I could see him being pretty quickly good there. I don't know if he would be elite necessarily. I mean, they're just kind of assuming if Orgeron can win a title here and Les Miles can win a title here, then a decent coach can win a title here. And but it would be a surprise to Notre Dame fans for Kelly to leave. But it's also the money. LSU
He's very comfortable.
Huge checkbook, and LSU would, Kelly would be on their radar screen because of South Louisiana, because part of South Louisiana is so Catholic that there's a lot of Notre Dame fans actually there. And so it would make sense. Otherwise, Notre Dame's kind of off the SEC radar typically because don't play them very often. Most SEC fans think of Notre Dame as overrated because of all the Heistmans, as I like to call
it.
Because they are overrated. Yeah. Everyone should think of Notre Dame as fucking overrated.
But I can't imagine Kelly on the eve of possibly going to the playoffs is going to jump to LSU.
Yeah, I can't. That the announcement is where I would look at that and go, I don't see an announcement happening tomorrow because even if it's in discussion or even if it's a done deal, I can't, because there, as we've seen through not only the college football season, but also the NFL season, crazy shit's happening. And I don't see that Notre Dame has a legit chance to make the college football playoffs still.
Yeah.
You don't interrupt that. You do not interrupt that with an announcement like this. You just don't.
They just need either Michigan or Alabama to get upset, and they're in. And the only reason why they wouldn't leapfrog Cincinnati is because Cincinnati beat them this year. Correct. Otherwise, in another year, that committee would put Notre Dame above Cincinnati, even with one loss. But yeah, I can't imagine that. And so, we'll see. There are also rumors a week and a half ago that Lincoln Riley was on the plane to Baton Rouge, and that never came to. College football hiring season is great for the crazy rumors, especially on message boards. Be like, yeah, I saw so-and-so, the private plane, tracked him.
Here's the tail number. I know he was there.
Yeah. There were five times that John Gruden had been hired at Tennessee over the last 10
I remember that. As we know, Nick Saban was not going to be the coach at Alabama. We know that. And of course.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So it'll be interesting. But I do think Brian Kelly that would be a good fit at LSU. And it's probably the best fit that they could have, all things considered, looking at the landscape of available coaches right now.
You have a winning coach who knows how to, who's a solid recruiter, but definitely knows how to coach at this level, and they would be good right away. They'd be back to being elite.
And he's already had his ass beat by Nick Saban, so it's a good fit. It's a good fit for LSU.
Twice, right?
So yeah. So there you go. I'm good with it.
Well, Notre Dame's overrated, so they constantly get in games that they should not be in, and then they get subsequently fucking blown out. That has literally been them for the past 20 years.
Because they're good, but they're just not elite talent-wise. And he's a solid he's a solid coach, but he's not really an overperformer. They don't overachieve. They overachieve Vegas expectations. Like Brian Kelly has been a great underdog betting coach since his Cincinnati days. In fact, going back to his Central Michigan days. But but Notre Dame, unless they step up in class, if they step up in class, they get crushed. They're kind of like Wisconsin tends to be that way. Those programs that are really good, really disciplined, intensive, but you look at their talent and you're like, there's 6 or 7 guys that are going to make the league, not the whole roster. When you step up against a Clemson, an Alabama, a Georgia, a Florida when they're good, LSU when they're good, a USC when they're good, Ohio State when they're good, you're going up against an NFL roster most of the time. 2/3 of those guys at least will make will get an NFL paycheck. That's never been true. They don't play
anybody, and they don't play anybody. They have continuously not wanted to join a conference for a reason, and now they're not even playing. Like, they used to have like an annual Michigan game, or at least very close to annual. They don't have that anymore. This year they played Florida State, right? And maybe a couple years ago that would have been a big game, but not this year.
Right now. And I mean, their schedules, because they have locked in certain, some of the academies, some of the academic schools like Stanford, other people, they really depend on those programs being up for their schedule to be really good. Now, they played Wisconsin this year, but that's a good Notre Dame matchup. The tough matchup would be one of the elite programs in terms of, and they generally only sporadically schedule those programs. So the Tennessee's had some great wins in South Bend. We had a defensive lineman block a field goal with his rear end once to win the game. So that became infamous.
I was at a big upset at Notre Dame in maybe 2009, probably like 2009, when Navy went in there and beat Charlie Weiss. That was when Jimmy Clausen was there and Golden Tate was there. And I was fucking loving it because I grew up 35, 40 minutes from the Notre Dame campus, and I've hated Notre Dame my entire fucking life. And so to see them get beat by Navy at Notre Dame, it was fucking glorious. So much salt that day from South Bend, Indiana. It was perfect.
The last time Notre Dame was relevant for me was Rocket Ismail. That's how far back it goes.
Well, that was
Rocket Ismail.
When they still had open recruiting policies, Lou Holtz built a heck of a program there in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, you had a backfield with Ricky Waters, Jerome Bettis, and I think Rocket was actually part of that team. And he played a kind of hybrid role. That was an impressive running offense. I mean, that was, you're talking about guys 10+ years in the NFL, Hall of Famers. And then he had guys like Bryant Young on the defensive line. I mean, he had some serious talent back in the day. There's that famous game against, and back then they were also, Miami or Florida State was on the schedule every year. And that was when Miami was good. That was, Jimmy Johnson against Lou Holtz and things like that. I don't think Notre Dame can replace Kelly with a quality coach. Notre Dame's academic standards make it tough to recruit there. And Kelly was an overachiever. They had gone through many years post Holtz. Even Holtz couldn't recruit there at the end. I don't think that they could seriously take a major step back if they do lose Kelly as a coach.
Yeah, Notre Dame's a very unique school. There's literally nothing like it. So it.
Well, they have.
I think Kelly's a really good fit there, and so I'd be surprised if he left.
Yeah. The other thing is the Catholic schools don't produce the high school football talent they used to in like the 50s and 60s. The decline of manufacturing in the North really undermined. Like, you can tie Penn State's success and decline relative to the decline of the Pennsylvania. When you had coal miners' kids and steel workers' kids, Pennsylvania was a great high school football state. Now it's still a good high school football state, but no, it's nowhere not in the 1970s, early 1980s. It was on par with Florida. It was on par with Georgia, the high school talent coming out of
That's why Penn State was so damn good.
Exactly. Now, without that, so that and Notre Dame has also suffered. The academic standards and the decline of high school football talent of kids that were Catholic and just wanted to play for Notre Dame. That was the greatest thing in the world. That doesn't exist so much anymore. So I think if Notre Dame loses Brian Kelly, they'll tumble.
Yeah, there you go.
I was just looking at Rocket Ismail. God, I'm old. He was back in the late 80s, dude.
Yeah,
oh
80s,
my gosh. I bet 90% of people watching this have no idea who Rocket Ismail is. It's just like, man.
That's probably right. I mean, that was back when Michael Irvin was at Miami in the 80s. He was hanging out with drug dealers and getting into fights with the wrong people in South Beach. And
they both ended up on the Cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Lou Holtz he did a famous motivational speech because the Miami and Notre Dame players clashed before the game and they had to pull them apart. And Lou Holtz calmed them all down and he said, okay, after the game, you can do what you want, but leave Jimmy Johnson to me. It was a big motivational thing, famous legend. So that was back during that era when that was some fun. But the other thing that's changed is college football is recruiting. The level of talent is much higher. Any of those teams from the 80s or early 90s would not compete in the top 5 with these teams this year, that these days, because the passing game is so developed and so evolved. Like, people always ask, would a Bear Bryant team beat a Nick Saban team? Not very often.
No.
The game has totally changed.
The skill players are so much more insanely talented, so much depth as well. Whereas it's not anymore. You don't need the best offensive line. It obviously helps. Look at Alabama and some of the recruits they've had over the years. That obviously helps. But a lot of these guys, they're getting the ball out of the hands of these people in less than 3 seconds. So you don't need a big run blocking line anymore. You need an athletic line that can keep your quarterback free for just a few seconds, give him a couple lanes to throw. And that's how a lot of these guys are handling it right now. Lou Holtz also, go ahead.
I was say, just look at all the high scoring games in the playoffs, the college football playoffs, the last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, even with elite defenses, they get torched. LSU torched everybody. When Alabama was at the top offensively, torched everybody. You couldn't, Trevor Lawrence at times, you just couldn't stop him. No matter how good your D. That's why I'm curious about Georgia this year. This Georgia-Alabama game is the most interesting game, college or pro, for me this weekend. Not only is it a great matchup between the two most talented programs in all of college football, but you have a Georgia team that's really built on an elite defense, and elite defenses have not held up well against good offenses the last 5 years. And Georgia hasn't played an elite offense all year because Florida fell off the map by the time they played them. A lot of Florida players, for whatever reason, had quit about midway through that game and quit the rest of the season. When you lose the likes of Missouri, this Missouri team, you're not playing, costing Dan Mullen his job. So I think that game will be the most interesting. And will Georgia's elite defense hold a very talented Alabama offense in check? I have doubts that will occur, but we'll find out this weekend.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Lou Holtz, also famously the only coach that handed out ponchos to his players before he spoke to them, so that they didn't get too wet. 247 shades for 5. Do y'all think KC loses momentum with this bye week? Keep up the good work. I actually think it's a really good time for a bye week for KC. They've won like 3 or 4 games in a row now after a bad loss. They looked okay in a bounce back game, and then they've also looked okay, and I think that the bye week was probably a very good time for them. Andy Reid is historically great off of a bye week, like absolutely exceptionally great. So I think it's a good time for it.
Well, I mean, as the fact that, Patrick Mahomes is my fantasy quarterback, I really hope that he, can start showing up. I need more than 7 points out of him for sure. I mean, I don't know. This may upset Robert because, I think Aaron Rodgers is overrated, right? I think that, right? Like, not that I think he's bad. I think he's a great quarterback. I just don't ever think he's been the best in the league. I've always thought Tom Brady's the best. So I think Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback probably I've ever seen. But I feel the same way about like with Mahomes. Mahomes' talent is off the fucking charts. Okay. The guy can do things that most people can't do. Maybe him and Aaron Rodgers are the only two can do it. But the media has overhyped Patrick Mahomes in a lot of ways. Not to say his numbers don't support it, but they've handed him the mantle. Suddenly Aaron Rodgers became the second best quarterback to them because they were like, oh, Patrick Mahomes is the best. I'm like, what? No, he's not. Like, he's great. But they always say, oh, Tom Brady has a stacked team. Well, so does Patrick Mahomes. That's like the team has been stacked, absolutely stacked. And, they were, and again, when you have Andy Reid as that amazing head coach, amazing offensive head coach, bringing in that long-term coaching mindset into it, the talent that they've had, and the fact that Patrick Mahomes has been lightning in a bottle, it's been a perfect storm for them. But losing a Super Bowl or losing in big games has a very negative impact on teams. We've seen this time and time again. And I don't know if the hangover from the Super Bowl loss is one of the things that's affecting them, but that's clearly having some type of impact. But the talent is there. But has the league figured out Patrick Mahomes to an extent where they can at least contain him? That's the question right now. So I didn't think we'd be these deep into the season where Kansas City will be playing this badly still. I figured they would get it turned around, and they haven't. But if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Andy Reid and the talent that he has on this team.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I thought Mahomes was a good quarterback who Andy Reid made into an elite quarterback. And the only thing I don't know is, did Tampa Bay defensively uncover something about Kansas City's offense or Mahomes that is taking them this long to fix, that teams are repeating or replicating? I don't know. I haven't seen a video breakdown of that. But I mean, you look at Kaepernick never survived being exposed by the Ravens. Yep. Jared Goff never survived being exposed by Belichick. To some degree, Garoppolo is only now coming back from having the problems he had, though that was more a defensive collapse than an offensive collapse for the 49ers, which that particular coach was, part of like every big collapse in the history of the Super Bowl. But because he was on the Falcons team too that lost, that blew it. And to that Super Chat's question about Atlanta, I think Matt Ryan may be getting past his prime. And they need to look at upgrading their offensive personnel. May need to get a replacement for Ryan at some point. He's on the backside of his career for sure. They had a decent game against Jacksonville, but now they've had some injuries this year, and they let Julio Jones walk, which was probably a mistake. But the
Calvin Ridley hurt them when I don't know what the fuck's going on with him. It's a mental thing.
Ever since New England had that comeback, they've never been the same. So it's like maybe psychologically something about the Super Bowl losses these days, because it didn't have that effect on the Broncos or the Bills back in the day. They would lose and be right back in the Super Bowl the next year, and lose and be back in the Super Bowl again. Broncos
Their offensive line is garbage, though. Like, if you're gonna have Matt Ryan, right? You have this top 4 pick. You end up picking Kyle Pitts, elite, talented tight end. But if you're gonna have Matt Ryan there, you need a good offensive line, because he can't move. He's a statue. He's always been a statue to some. Mm-hmm. He could move a little early in his career, fresh out of Boston College, but realistically, he's never been that guy. He's been a statue back there. So you can't just have him getting run over and blasted all the time and expect him to do anything at this point in his career. So they go out, they get a replacement for Julio as an offensive weapon, but they didn't shore up that line. And I think that was probably their biggest mistake, because they've had a terrible run game.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's the kind of quarterback that would benefit tremendously from a good power run game. The other problem was their defense got atrocious, to where they just had problems everywhere. They had made it after the Super Bowl year, they made a sequence of bad GM decisions. And it's probably going to take a couple of years for them to bounce back out of that without getting some luck or fortune.
Years where that offense was popping, obviously Kyle Shanahan, I think, had a lot to do with that. But you had Tevin Coleman and you had Devontae Freeman with that 1-2 punch in the backfield. Not today, but yesterday, they had their first run of over 20 yards the entire season when Cordero Patterson, who's not even a running back, got free. Yeah. And was able to go like 21 yards. And that's the longest one they've had all year. That tells you how much that line has been struggling. So I think that it's both coaching and personnel for them. They just need a reboot. I think they've only extended their drop off with what they did this year.
They'd be better off just bringing Michael Vick back at this point than keeping Matt Ryan. So
I'll say somebody who would be, that would be a good stopping place for Dan Mullen. Someplace like that where he could really use his offensive creativity. Obviously, he knows Pitts. He made Pitts the star. He did it at Florida. But someplace where Millen has enough pieces that he could recreate a new offense and make him really effective. That would be someplace like that. But, yeah, they need a lot of help at Atlanta to get back to being a quality program.
Yeah. Crypto Joe for $5. Sports Wars is the only sports I watch. More LeCarron coverage, the better. Keep up the good work. Hey, LeBron's given me a lot of material over the past couple of weeks.
He absolutely has, and we appreciate that. I mean, the Sports Wars channel is really getting a lot of traction lately. Our live streams have been kicking ass. They did better when I was not here, so maybe I should go away. Ryan had like 2,200 people watching him last Sunday. So it was the Kyle Rittenhouse thing bumped everybody, because we knew we were going to talk about that with all these idiot athletes running their mouth about everything. But no, it has. I mean, the numbers have been good. We're so proud of this channel, and it's not slowing down. We're going to keep pushing. Robert's having Robert here is great. I think Johnny said it earlier. He said, does Robert know more about sports or the law at this point? Like, it's hard to figure out.
It's a cost. And obviously having Robert here really elevates the conversation for these ones. And the Sports Wars Sunday stream is obviously kind of our like big, like kind of sexy topics that happen during the week and the controversy. This one, I really like the feel of this one because we get to actually talk about sports. We ended up in some discussion about fucking 1980s college football, which
I'm
we
looking
just
up
don't
Rocket
get to have too
Ismail.
often.
I'm looking up Rocket Ismail, highlights, and I'm like, damn, that guy was good. I haven't thought about Rocket in forever, so it's great. Yeah, good stuff.
Exactly. And we had almost 500 people 1 point watching tonight, which is, I think, a record for this Monday night stream, and we're only going to keep this rolling.
Yep.
But Robert, what do you have going on at sportspicks.locals.com?
Yeah, so everybody that got free picks all this whole football season, we had a fantastic college football, NFL, soccer to date, and the NBA's off to a good start. So I think it's 14 winning weeks out of 16. The NFL, I think, is 16-2 so far from Sunday. So, it was an awesome Sunday. So just profit. I think at this point, people would have already doubled their money from their core investment, whatever they put in. So I use a test case of people betting $100 a game and they have $5,000 to bet all year and that sort of thing. But people have, of course, different amounts. Some people bet $10 a game. Some people bet $1,000 a game. I'm betting about over $100,000 each weekend. But it's been fantastically profitable for everybody who followed it. So it's going to be fun, and we'll get into some NBA. College basketball's off to a nice start. We had Duke to pull the straight-up upset as a 3-1 dog against Gonzaga, and they did here in Vegas this past week. So had some fun there, and the NBA's been profitable as well, particularly the NFL, the NBA lines. So basically at sportspicks.locals.com, you can get free picks and predictions through the rest of football season. And I'll start doing weekly AMAs there to answer questions of subscribers, and it'll be fun. So the goal is to have a place people can have for the sports betting side of the equation, information, intel, good insights that can be profitable in ways beyond just the enjoyment of the sports itself.
Nice.
Absolutely.
When you add layers to it, I'm a sports fan at my core. So, I'm going to find enjoyment out of just good football, good basketball, things like that. But when you add a layer to it, so like the fantasy element, this is like I said, the first time and I always was like, man, it's going to take distractions away. I'm going to have to pull against my team, or I'm going to have to pull, but it doesn't. It just adds a different layer because now you're interested in every game and you have to pay attention to all this and then have to look, okay, now, because I just did drafting for because the Patriots have an off week in a couple of weeks. So I have their defense now and I have to prepare. So I'm having to make moves and looking who's playing who. And it just adds a whole different dynamic that me as a sports fan has never had. Then when you add the betting element to it, that changes the game because now you've got money, and so when all these people are saying, I can't believe people take sports seriously. Dude, there is so much money to be made in sports if you pay attention. If you pay attention, you do your homework. And that's something we want to move, Sports Wars into is more of the betting element. So, there's a lot to it. And that's why sports is so important to so many people because it's layered in terms of what you can do and your interest level into it. So it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, it definitely makes
great. Both entertaining and educational. And compared to, say, Portnoy, and I think he's like 0 for 9 for his pick of the week or whatever it is. We actually make successful picks here at Sports Wars.
Yeah. Well, it's also what those guys are doing. It's like fucking what they have there with the Barstool betting app that they've gone through. It's awesome because it's getting so many normies involved and people that are just Barstool fans, and that's the nice thing about that. It's just normal people. It's regular everyday people. Now, do I want to take gambling advice from Big Cat? Maybe not necessarily, but it's fun as hell to watch them have these picks and all the respect for what those guys have built, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And we're gonna build something similar and better, and we're gonna kick ass and take names because me and Ryan are so fucking competitive. Tonight we're going to be playing Mario Golf for our premium members on the website, and all we're going to do is yell at each other and scream because it doesn't even matter what we're playing. We just want to compete. Like a few weeks ago when me and you played against each other, because I've only had 2 losses this year in fantasy, and Ryan's one of those losses. And then we played again, and both of us had a shit week. Remember, Ryan? We both had a bad week. Both of us had a bad week. I backed into that victory. I was basically Alabama versus Auburn. I got lucky and won that game.
Yeah, you shouldn't be proud of that.
Yeah, I was not proud of that win. I wanted to beat you like that game you and Uche had. Holy shit. What was the point?
I won by like a couple tenths of a point, basically.
Literally, Ryan wouldn't even. He was nowhere near his phone. He just turned everything off.
I just started streaming. I started streaming because Uche had like 3 players on a Monday night game or a Sunday night game or something like that, and Derrick Henry had a big touchdown. Then Josh Allen had a big touch. I'm like, fuck it. I'm not watching it because I know it's going to be close. So I just turned everything off, and sure as shit, he needed like one more reception from Emmanuel Sanders, or like 1 touchdown run, or even like a 3-yard gain from Josh Allen would have made the difference. And that's when they went for it on 4th and 4 at their own goal line, and they didn't get it. That was the last play of the fucking game. So.
And you won off of that. But it was
well, it's
crazy,
like I call fantasy and sports betting like the Hunter Thompson way to enjoy football. So he would have everybody around, and they would bet like 25 cents, the equivalent of $1, $2 today on the next play. You know, is the next play going to be a running play? Is going to be passing plays? Is going to be to this person? Going to be to that person? Is going to be 2 yards? Is going to be 7 yards? Is going to be a first down? Not first down? And it just added drama and enjoyment and entertainment to the way everybody interacted with the plays and the games. It's like, you know, when people bet on the Oscars and have their little list of who's going to win this. It just adds fun to the game. I also find it's learning. You when you have money on the game, or you have pride on the game, like with fantasy or other aspects, you end up having to learn more about the sport than you otherwise would have. So you become a more educated, informed fan. And most people enjoy being a more educated, informed fan as part of the game, as part of their aesthetic entertainment as well. So I think it's this is only going to keep growing and growing and growing. I mean, New Jersey's already bigger than Vegas in sports betting. So, I mean, this is just going to keep taking off.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. But an awesome crowd tonight. We really appreciate it. Great conversation as always. And that's what you're going to find on Monday evening quarterback. As always, we thank Robert for joining us. Jeremy, glad you're back. Kind of. But and yeah, we're going to go. If you're a premium Geeks and Gamers member, you can watch us play some Mario Golf. We won't be betting with anything other than our pride.
That's right. That's right. All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you for being here. Thanks to Robert for being here. We'll see you tomorrow for Tuesday night's main event.
Oh, real quick, I just saw this one from
Christoph
Richard.
Cigar. It's a Christoph.
There you go. It's a Christoph cigar. Richard E. Normus.
Hey, Richard sent a super chat last night during Mario Kart, and he said, Ryan, thanks for recommending Sons of Anarchy. Great show. And I think he meant Jeremy. Because I was like, Ryan hasn't seen Sons of Anarchy, I don't think. He needs to, but I think
recommended it.
Yeah, so I recommend it. It's one of the best shows ever, and it would not exist in 2021. Have you seen it, Robert?
Oh, yes.
Oh, so damn good. So damn good. So, yeah, but he did. He said, Ryan, thanks for recommending. I was like, I think you meant Jeremy.
Although I am a big fan of casual racism in my shows, I have not watched Sons of Anarchy, though I've been told it's really right up my alley. But thank you, guys. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.